Through tonight, Alabama has carried out its fourth execution of the year. Geoffrey West, who was convicted of killing gas station clerk Margaret Berry in Etowah County in 1997, was put to death using nitrogen hypoxia.
Your reporter Taylor Pollock witnessing West's execution today. She was in Atmore and she has more from the victim's family and how they're reacting to his death.
Yeah, the execution took roughly 15 minutes, according to ADOC Commissioner John Hamm. And while state leaders are saying justice has been served tonight, the son of the woman Geoffrey West was accused of killing says he's praying for his peace.
On the evening of September 25, 2025, the state of Alabama prepared to execute Geoffrey Todd West. The case was, on its surface, a tragic but familiar story. A robbery at a gas station that ended in a senseless murder nearly 3 decades prior. But as the final hours ticked away, this execution became a focal point for a profound and deeply personal debate, not about guilt or innocence, but about justice, mercy, and the very purpose of capital punishment. At the heart of this debate was an extraordinary voice, the son of the victim who, in an act of remarkable grace, fought to save his mother's killer. Tonight, we examine the case of Geoffrey Todd West and the murder of Margaret Berry. We'll explore the crime that shattered a family and the long, winding path to the execution chamber. This story contains descriptions of violence and may be disturbing to some viewers. Viewer discretion is advised. It all began on March 28, 1997, at a Harold's Chevron in Etowah County. A 33-year-old mother of 2, Margaret Berry, was working behind the counter, likely counting the hours until she could return home to her boys. A young man she knew, a former employee, walked in with a gun. The robbery netted just $250 from a cookie can, but it cost Margaret Berry her life. 28 years later, the man who pulled the trigger, Geoffrey Todd West, was strapped to a gurney. But the most compelling voice in the room wasn't the wardens or the prisoners. It was the voice of the 11-year-old boy who lost his mother that night. A boy who was now a man pleading for the state to show the one thing he had already given: forgiveness. This case immediately forces us to ask a fundamental question about the nature of justice. Is its primary purpose to punish a crime according to the law, or is it to provide healing and closure for the family affected? What do you believe the ultimate goal of justice should be? Share your perspective with us in the comments. For those of you who are new, subscribing is the best way to support the channel. And to our incredible returning viewers, we see you and we thank you. You are our CPR, the life support of the executioner's pen. Every comment and share makes a difference. To understand the end of this story, we have to go back to the beginning. Margaret Berry was, by all accounts, the heart of her small family. At 33, her life revolved around her 2 sons, one of whom was 11-year-old Will. She was a woman known for her kindness and a quiet, steady faith, values she worked hard to instill in her children. Her job at the local Chevron was a means to an end, a way to provide for the family she cherished. Geoffrey Todd West was 21 years old in 1997. A young man at a crossroads. He had worked at the same Chevron station, a fact that made the subsequent crime all the more personal. Friends from his youth described him as a good person who had gotten off track, falling into a difficult life with his girlfriend where money was a constant source of pressure. In the rural landscape of late 90s Alabama, opportunities could feel scarce, and for some, desperation could curdle into reckless choices. For West, that choice would be robbery, a decision made with his girlfriend that would lead them to a familiar, vulnerable target. He was a young man who, in his own words years later, struggled to understand the person he was and the choices he made in that desperate chapter of his life. The night of March 28, 1997, was like any other at Harold's Chevron. The fluorescent lights hummed, casting a sterile glow on the aisles of snacks and drinks. The crime itself was not a complex, drawn-out affair. It was a quick, brutal, and tragically senseless act. West entered the store with a .45 caliber handgun, the cold weight of it a stark contrast to the familiar environment he once worked in. He confronted Margaret Berry, a woman he knew by name. There was no argument, no struggle for the money. She complied, handing over the station's cash, roughly $250 that was kept in a simple cookie can. With the money in hand, the robbery was over. But according to prosecutors, West made a second, fatal decision. To eliminate the only witness who could identify him, he forced Margaret to lie face down on the cold linoleum floor behind the counter. As she lay there, helpless, he raised the pistol and shot her, execution style, in the back of the head. He and his girlfriend then fled into the night, leaving behind a scene of unimaginable horror for just a few $100s. The act was so final, so disproportionate to the crime of robbery, that it ensured the case would be nothing less than capital murder. The investigation was swift, with West being a former employee and his girlfriend quickly agreeing to cooperate in exchange for a 35-year sentence. Police had their suspect. The case against West was ironclad. But as the legal process began, another journey was just starting. Will Berry was only 11 when his world was shattered. He grew up in the shadow of his mother's murder, his childhood defined by her absence. For years, he and his father did what was asked of them by the state. They supported the prosecution's pursuit of the death penalty, believing it was the only path to justice. For years, he and his father did what was asked of them by the state. They supported the prosecution's pursuit of the death penalty, believing it was the only path to justice. But as the years turned into decades, Will's perspective began to shift. He became a father himself, and eventually a grandfather. Guided by the faith his mother had taught him, he began to see the world through a different lens. He saw the endless cycle of appeals and the constant reopening of wounds. He came to believe that true justice was not about vengeance, but about grace. In the weeks leading up to the execution, he took an extraordinary step. He began writing letters to Geoffrey West. In that correspondence, West expressed his deep, unwavering remorse for his actions.
There's not a day that goes by that I don't regret it, and wish that I could take that back. If I could do anything in this life to bring her back, anything at all, I will be very committed to it. I am deeply sorry for my stupid actions.
Will Berry did what many would consider impossible. He forgave. Publicly. It's a level of compassion that challenges our understanding of justice. This forces us to ask, where is the line between forgiveness and accountability? Can both truly exist in the wake of a heinous act? I'm genuinely interested in your perspective on this complex dilemma. Share your thoughts in the comments, and I'll personally acknowledge your comment. The words from Will Berry are, "I forgive him, and so does my dad. We don't want him to die."
Vengeance isn't for the state, it's for the Lord. I don't want the state to take revenge in my name or my family's name from my mother.
He even requested a face-to-face meeting with West, a final act of reconciliation. West agreed. Berry wanted to pray with the man who killed his mother, to offer grace in person. But the Alabama Department of Corrections denied the request, citing security regulations. The Federal Defender's Office, which represented West, called the decision a lost opportunity for closure, for healing, for humanity. The two men would never meet. Governor Ivey, facing both public pressure and her legal duties, ultimately denied the plea for clemency. In a formal letter to Will Berry, she acknowledged his profound act of forgiveness, but stated that her duty was to uphold the sentence handed down by the jury and the laws of Alabama.
Almost 30 years ago, Geoffrey West went in with the intent to rob and kill, and he cowardly shot Miss Berry in the back of the head. Tonight, the lawfully imposed death sentence has been carried out. Justice has been served.
Imagine you are the governor in this exact situation. On one side, you have the verdict from a jury and the laws of your state demanding this execution. On the other, you have the victim's own son begging you for mercy. What decision would you make? It's a choice with no easy answer. Let us know how you would have handled it in the comments below. And so, the machinery of death moved forward. West had spent over 26 years on death row at Holman Correctional Facility, a period longer than he had been alive at the time of his crime. Life there was a monotonous routine of isolation, a countdown with no certain end date. During his decades of incarceration, the methods of execution themselves came under intense scrutiny. After a series of troubled lethal injections, Alabama authorized nitrogen hypoxia as an alternative in 2018. West was among the first death row inmates to select the new method, though at the time it was an entirely untested procedure, more theoretical than practical. By 2025, it was no longer a theory. The state had become the nation's primary user of the controversial method. I just heard the eyewitness account of West's final moments. This was the 7th time nitrogen gas was used for an execution in the United States. The clinical term is nitrogen hypoxia, but the reality is what witnesses saw.
West declined a chance for final words in the death chamber, but his attorney sent out a written statement saying he was humbled by the forgiveness extended to him by the son of the woman he killed, and pointing to his faith, saying, quote, "I know where I'm going and look forward to seeing Miss Berry when I get there," end quote. Berry's son, Will, also giving a statement saying he was stunned the execution moved forward despite his objections, and saying he's praying for peace for West. In the execution chamber, West appeared to turn a pale blue color and salivated at the mouth at points, slowly shaking his head during the flow of nitrogen gas, and could be heard gasping for air. Commissioner Ham saying the execution went exactly as expected.
There's always involuntary movement, and everybody's different because we have seen a variation of movement in the 6 we've done, but yes, West was the least movement that we've seen.
We have to ask, does this sound more humane to you than lethal injection? Or does it feel like a terrifying experiment on a human being? Let us know your honest gut reaction in the comments. On September 25, 2025, Geoffrey West was moved to the Death Watch cell just a few feet from the execution chamber. He spent his final hours with his spiritual advisor. When the time came, he was led into the chamber and strapped to the gurney. The room was silent, thick with tension. As West declined to give a final statement, the chamber held a heavy silence. He had no message for the world, but his refusal left a hanging question. Was there no final private acknowledgement for Will Berry, the man who had shown him so much grace in his final weeks? A blue-rimmed industrial mask connected to a hose was placed over his face. He looked towards his attorney in the witness room and gave a final thumbs up. At 5:56 p.m., the warden gave the order, and pure nitrogen gas began to flow into the mask, depriving his body of oxygen. According to reporter Taylor Pollock, who witnessed the execution, West's reaction was immediate and visceral. He could be heard gasping for air, his body straining against the restraints. His head began to rock slowly from side to side. At points, he appeared to turn a pale blue color and salivated at the mouth. The clinical procedure had become a graphic, disturbing spectacle. Commissioner John Ham later addressed the media, stating the execution went as planned.
There's always involuntary movement, and everybody's different because we have seen a variation of movement in the 6 we've done, but yes, West was the least movement that we've seen.
This official assessment that West's visible struggle represented the least movement they had yet seen stood in stark and chilling contrast to the graphic scene witnessed by reporters. After several minutes of sporadic breathing, West became still. He was pronounced dead at 6:22 p.m. Will Berry also issued a statement, his words heavy with sorrow, and he expressed that he was stunned the execution had moved forward despite his strenuous objections.
From what we understand, he acted out of character that night. People he grew up with said he was a good person who got off track. We pray that he gains peace when he meets his maker.
The execution of Geoffrey Todd West leaves behind a complex and haunting legacy. There was no question of his guilt. He admitted to the crime, expressed profound remorse, and spent nearly 3 decades in prison. But the central conflict of this case was not between the state and the criminal, but between the state's definition of justice and the victim's family's definition. It forces a profound question. What exactly is the purpose of the death penalty? If it is to provide justice and closure for victims, what happens when the victims themselves say it will do the opposite? When a family finds a path to forgiveness, does the state have a moral obligation to listen? Will Berry's journey from a grief-stricken boy to a man advocating for his mother's killer is a powerful testament to the human capacity for grace and the complexities of healing. The state, in its role, argued for a different, more rigid principle, that some crimes are so heinous they demand the ultimate price, a debt that forgiveness cannot erase. The case of Geoffrey Todd West and Margaret Berry is a solemn, powerful story about the intersection of law and grace, a tragic reminder that the path to justice is rarely straight, and the path to healing is never simple. Now that Geoffrey West is gone, the questions his case raised remain. So, what is the true legacy of this story? Was justice truly served when the sentence was carried out, as the governor stated? Or was a greater form of justice lost when Will Berry's plea for mercy was denied? This is a debate with no easy answers, and we want to know what you think. Join the discussion below and subscribe to The Executioner's Pen for more explorations into the complexities of capital punishment. Thank you for watching.